What if I told you that one of the most common questions people ask about the global economy sounds simple, but becomes meaningless the moment you examine how modern money actually works? If almost every country is in debt, people ask, then who is the creditor? It feels logical. Debt implies a lender. Someone must be sitting on the other side of the table, holding the money. So where is it? Welcome back to Historic Finance Lab. Today, we're not here for conspiracy theories. We're not here for comforting slogans or easy villains. We're here to slow this question down, dismantle it carefully, and understand why it keeps coming up even though it's based on a misunderstanding of how modern economic systems operate. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: the global debt system doesn't function like a household, a company, or even a traditional creditor-debtor relationship. And once you see that, the question itself changes. Some point to China, others blame the United States. Some name international institutions like the IMF or the World Bank. On the surface, that seems reasonable. But that intuition comes from an outdated mental model. In reality, countries lend to each other constantly. The United States issues bonds that are held by foreign governments, domestic banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and central banks. China holds U.S. treasuries, but the U.S. also holds foreign assets. European nations lend across borders. Japan holds an enormous amount of government debt, much of it issued by its own government and held domestically. What this tells us immediately is that global debt is not a simple chain with one final lender at the end. It's a network. And in that network, gross debt figures often hide something important: net positions. A country can have large outstanding debt and still be a net creditor globally once you account for its financial assets. High debt does not automatically mean dependence on an external master. This is where the question starts to wobble. Now, let's talk about institutions like the IMF, because they're often described as the global lender of last resort. The IMF does provide loans during crises, but it does not function like a giant vault of money. Its resources come from member countries, and its role is primarily administrative and stabilizing. It can allocate reserve assets, coordinate assistance, and manage liquidity stress, but it does not replace the underlying structure of sovereign debt markets. So once again, the same puzzle appears. If governments borrow from markets, from institutions, from their own citizens, and from each other, and still remain indebted, where is the surplus? To answer that, we have to stop thinking about debt as a stockpile of money and start thinking about money as a process. In modern economies, most money is not physical cash. Notes and coins make up a small fraction of the total supply. The majority exists as digital balances created through lending. When governments issue bonds, commercial banks and financial institutions purchase them. In doing so, new money is often created through the credit system itself. This isn't a secret. It isn't illegal. It's how modern credit-based banking systems function. When credit is extended, money enters the economy. When loans are repaid, money is removed. The system expands and contracts through balance sheets, not printing presses. Here's the key point, and it's often misunderstood. When credit is created, the principal enters the system. The interest does not. That interest must be paid from future income, future production, or future borrowing. This doesn't mean the system is mathematically doomed, but it does mean something important. The system is designed around continuity, not closure. Debt is not structured to be settled all at once. It is structured to be rolled forward. This is why governments don't eliminate their national debt the way a household pays off a mortgage. Historically, sovereign debt is managed through growth, refinancing, inflation, restructuring, or, in extreme cases, default. Final settlement is rare. Extension is normal. So when people ask, who owns all the money? They're assuming there must be a final resting place. There isn't, because money in this system isn't something that sits still. Instead of asking who holds the money, the more accurate question is, how does value move over time? When governments borrow, the immediate benefit is visible. Spending increases. Services are funded. Crises are delayed. But the cost is distributed gradually through taxation, currency dilution, and changes in asset prices. Those who hold real assets, land, equities, businesses, productive capital tend to benefit from this structure. Those who rely primarily on fixed wages or cash savings tend to feel pressure over time. This isn't the result of a secret plan. It's a structural outcome of how debt-based systems interact with growth and inflation. And this distinction matters, because saying the system favors asset holders is not the same as saying the system is controlled by a single group. There is no hidden committee deciding outcomes. The incentives emerge from the rules themselves. Debt allowed modern economies to develop rapidly. It financed infrastructure, industrialization, technological progress, and recovery from wars and crises. Without it, the modern world wouldn't exist in its current form. But debt also normalized postponement. Governments learned that rolling obligations forward was politically easier than confronting hard trade-offs. Voters learned that benefits could arrive now while costs were delayed. Financial markets evolved to price, trade, and profit from future obligations. Over time, permanent debt stopped being an emergency tool and became the default state. So when someone asks if nearly every country is in debt, who's the creditor? The honest answer is not a nation, not a bank, and not an institution. The honest answer is that the system behaves as if the future itself is the counterparty. Future income services past promises. Future growth stabilizes present liabilities. Future productivity absorbs today's obligations. As long as those assumptions hold, the structure remains stable. When they weaken, stress appears. That's why debt crises tend to follow periods of slowing growth. That's why rising interest rates cause tension in highly indebted economies. That's why central banks move carefully, not because they fear inflation alone, but because they're managing a structure that depends on confidence and continuity. This doesn't mean collapse is inevitable. Debt-based systems can last a very long time. History shows they adapt, reset, and restructure. Sometimes through reform. Sometimes through inflation, sometimes through painful adjustments. But they don't end simply because debt exists. What does matter is how the costs of adjustment are distributed. Inflation reduces the real burden of debt but erodes savings. Austerity protects currency stability but slows growth. Defaults relieve borrowers but punish lenders. Every solution shifts pain, there is no neutral outcome. Which brings us back to the original question, not as a puzzle, but as a warning. If most countries carry debt, the real issue isn't that someone is secretly winning everything. The issue is that the system prioritizes ongoing obligation over final settlement. Debt isn't designed to end, it's designed to move forward. And understanding that changes how you interpret headlines, policy decisions, and economic fear narratives. There is no final vault where all the world's money sits. There is no single owner of global wealth. There is only a system that transfers value across time, from future to present, from savers to borrowers, from currency holders to asset holders, legally, gradually, and continuously. Once you understand that, you stop asking who to blame. And you start asking the only question that actually matters. How do you position yourself inside a system that was never designed to stop? That's the real lesson. And that's why this question matters far more than it first appears. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into how our financial world really works.